All right, you are listening to the Omnicast. I'm your host, Tyler Jacobson, along with my co-host, Dan Nix. Still.
Thanks for remembering.
Yeah, I try. It takes a minute sometimes. We're joined today outside. It's actually Omnicast outside. It's a little overcast. We're on the rooftop. That was really bad. Fix it in post. So we're actually out here on the rooftop in Denver, Colorado, with our guests, Virgil, Dickerson.
Hello.
And he's with, it'll be announced by the point that this
Kream, Konsulting, and the Passport Program.
Yes. And Michael King.
Hi, everybody.
Graphic designer extraordinaire. He has designed, by his estimates, thousands.
Probably thousands of posters for any number of bands that you would care to listen to.
What's your biggest piece of work?
For bands?
No, just in general.
I was once commissioned to do a website for Ozzy Osbourne's son. It was one of my first projects. And then I kept getting looped on these email chains about their reality show, which never quite took off, like the sequel with just him and Jack Osbourne. And I kept having to email them and be like, take me off of this. And that was probably the biggest. I don't even think you can find it online. That was probably the biggest profile, but.
Wow.
Okay. All right.
That's noteworthy. I mean, we can just stop there.
Yeah, we can just, the end. Thank you for listening.
I mean, Virgil, do you want to, some people listening to this may have no idea who you are, and I don't want to intro you at this point, so.
I don't know. I've done a lot of different things. I ran a record label called Suburban Home for 18 years and shot over 190 records from bands from all over. I worked for a company called Illegal Pete's based here in Denver. They're a fast casual burrito chain for 8 years. I've kind of done a little bit of everything. So right now I'm doing my own consulting business and working for a program called the Passport Program, which is basically a field guide that gets you 2-for-1 drinks all over many cities.
I would also challenge anybody listening to ask if they know anyone who knows Virgil, because I'm pretty sure that you're like 2 degrees away from this guy.
Virgil is sort of like the Kevin Bacon of kind of the Mountain West.
He is. The gift that Virgil has, one of the many, is his network and his community building, and I'm envious of it.
And there's not many fat Asian dudes named Virgil. Maybe it's 0. Maybe I'm the only one.
What if all fat Asian guys are named Virgil? There's just not that many of them, and you really haven't done your research. That's all I'm saying.
That's why I'm searching the earth for the others.
So fat Asian guys named Virgil, send an email to pros@omniphonic.com. Actually, visit our website too, omniphonic.com. And get in touch if you have any questions about anything that comes up on this episode or thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. All right, so this is actually where the Omnicast idea started. Dannon had this really interesting question before we ever launched the podcast, and I'll let you get into it.
So we were sitting in Pete's, actually, and I look to my left, and I just see a row of band posters. And this was about the time when Tyler and I first started doing marketing together. And I asked him, are those effective? Because I'm not sure they are. So we started having a debate. And that's why we wanted to bring you guys in, because you've designed thousands of band posters, so you're intimately experienced with what it takes to do them. And Virgil has produced so much music that he has insight as to the best ways to market.
I've been probably involved with thousands of posters, and maybe having designed maybe 1 poster in my life.
I think maybe you requested at least a few hundred of those 1,000 from me.
You. Yeah. Michael and I worked together at Illegal Pete's, and so we've definitely worked together on hundreds of posters. And then prior to that, all the different bands I worked with.
Oh, and comics and
just. I'm
trying to wonder now, just not to go too off topic, but I wonder if I've ever made an 11x17 poster for someone who was not a band or a comic. Like, you don't see it for toothpaste or.
It's true.
Like, it's just bands, comics, maybe spoken word.
Is it an underserved market then? Do we need to be making 11x17 posters for
Colgate,
companies?
Lay's potato chips, auto insurance, fuel injection. Yeah.
All right. So I remember the days being in a band, and I think at one point probably all of us were in a band, not together, but at some point we probably all were.
But I like that idea. I like where this is going.
Right?
I'm in.
We want talented musicians.
Oh, I'm not. No.
Oh.
I'm neither.
But I remember making these and printing them out and putting them on lampposts, and I'm not really sure why. It's just what everyone did. So, from your perspective, are they effective?
I was thinking about this earlier, and I realized that there's a question of effective at what? Like, what are you trying? Are you trying to sell a ticket to an event, or are you trying to kind of create sort of a visual ecosystem, which sounds pretentious, but it's when I see these, when I'm in a part of town of any city and I see a lot of these 11 by 17 type band posters everywhere, I kind of get a sense that I'm in a place where I might find like-minded folk. And I realize that it kind of serves that purpose on a street level. I don't know why I stumbled over the word purpose. Post, please.
But mostly because you don't believe it.
True. But I wondered if like there's that facet of it, just like putting it out into the world as a way of kind of presenting your brand in a way. It's like bands. I mean, a lot of bands now, especially EDM bands, have logos. But before that, a lot of bands didn't have logos, but they did have the 11 by 17 poster. And putting that into the world was kind of your way of like just signifying your little mark. But it wasn't necessarily to sell a ticket. So I wonder if there was like an angle there.
So maybe to grow awareness and grow a little bit of brand trust because you are amongst other bands who are doing that same thing.
I think that's why a lot of people do it, just to put there for the same reason you put artwork on an album cover. Like you don't really need it, but you want to give a little thrust to something. But that doesn't affect the local punk rock club that just has the text that says the name of the band.
Right.
And that's obviously that's a different thing. That is to sell a ticket. Does that work to, as a cash transaction? I don't know.
I think the answer is yes and no. I mean, when done really well, like if somebody makes an amazing silkscreen lithograph, like you look at that and you're like, wow, this is amazing. Will you go to the show because of that? Maybe not. But if it's a band that you're having an affinity to, and you're thinking about going to the show, you're going to want to maybe buy that poster. And then, talking about different styles of bands, I mean, there were, back when I used to work in record stores in the 90s, you could look at a poster and tell if it's going to be a jam band, a punk rock band, a garage rock. I mean, there were certain aesthetics that you could pull from that. And when it wasn't as noisy back then, those posters were effective.
But can you remember ever going to a show because of a poster?
I think
of a band that you had not previously been aware of.
I would say that not when there's a band that I was not previously aware of, probably not. But there were definitely times where I didn't know that show was going on, and that poster was. I was at the record store and I saw this poster. I'm like, oh, that show's going on. I didn't know that was happening.
I've Googled bands from posters. I've seen like, that's cool. What is that band? Maybe because you're in line at some like burrito restaurant and there's a whole wall of these things. It'd be like, oh, that's kind of interesting, but is Googling it enough of a transaction for that poster to be there, right?
Yes, I would say yes. Okay, so if we look at a marketing funnel, and this was, I think, one of the approaches that we were initially talking about and I think it's what you're talking about as well. You start with awareness, you go into consideration, you end with conversion. Somebody's buying a concert ticket, and then it goes into advocacy, where it's like, hey, Virgil, blah, 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 is coming to town. Let's go to the show, right? So if you actually went and you were like, that's a cool poster, I'm going to check out this band, now you're getting into that consideration part of the funnel. Now they've gotten you past awareness. Now you know the band exists, but you're taking that extra step to investigate the band, which actually, that's the only way you're going to get to conversion, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The only way you're going to buy a ticket, theoretically, is if you have an interest in the band. And you've just really signaled that if you've Googled them.
That's true. And I think in that way, the poster does, because it is just a weird shaped little billboard, a little, FedEx Kinko's made billboard for your band. And it's the same of like, in some ways, it's the same of like any, component of visual communication in a very crowded space. How do you, especially when you're in, the aforementioned like burrito restaurant or a little punk rock bar where they just have the wall covered with them, at that point you have white noise, and it's like, how do you pick that out? And maybe those posters weren't all meant to be put together, in a grid of like, 10 by 10 on the wall of a restaurant. Maybe that diminishes them somewhat, but I guess it's the same of seeing, a whole row of billboards down a big thoroughfare in a city. Like maybe just the one would be great, but when you just keep passing them one after the other, it just becomes... Yeah.
Well, so to that end, how many billboards have you seen today?
Honestly, I've probably blocked it out. I'm sure I've seen plenty, and I can't recall maybe one or two of them. Maybe there's, I don't know.
Okay, so do you remember any of the brands? Assuming you're not looking at a billboard behind you.
No, I'm not looking at one behind you. We are up on a rooftop here where I can see the mountains and all this good stuff. But the last billboard I remember was probably several days ago at most. It was that annoying Coors Light contains corn syrup.
That's the one I was thinking of too.
And there's like 6 of them. That's the thing, is they're all the same billboard and they put them in a row. And again, to this, like if you've got 6 of anything in a row, you're going to pay attention to it. But if you've got a bunch of them and they're just, you just see them and they just become part of that visual cluttered landscape.
But the other thing is they're also blocking out anybody else's grab for attention when they have 6 in a row. Yeah. Like you're blocking out everybody else. Oh yeah, you're going to pay attention to this.
Yeah,
message.
that's why doing 6 billboards in a row costs like a small island.
Yeah.
Okay, last time you were at a punk rock bar, though, do you remember seeing a poster? And if so, can you tell me? Well, of course you remember seeing a poster. Do you remember what bands you were looking at?
That one I actually do remember.
Okay,
but that one's more of a personal connection, just because there was a band called Hers.
Yes,
that recently died, and in my neighborhood they still have a bunch of their posters up. And I think that's a special case because I just had a recognition with that concept. But it's an interesting question. I do think that the things I like are more often to be found on an 11 by 17 poster as opposed to a billboard. So naturally I gravitate a little bit toward that. But that's, I think, more just because of the space I'm already interested in.
Well, to give a little background of the posters we've seen in the Illegal Pete's location, what you guys don't know is there's kind of a turf battle with all of those windows, and I used to manage that. So AEG has 3 windows. I believe that Live Nation has one. Cervantes has one. God, and maybe
Game of Thrones.
Maybe
Surgery
at one point, but there were times I had to negotiate and keep everybody at bay so that they didn't get too upset with each other, because they have each promoter has street teamers that go in and they take down the posters, they put up new ones, and sometimes when they don't know, they take down the wrong window, and then all hell breaks loose, And so to comment on a thing Michael said earlier, a lot of times they just get a stack of posters and there's not any thought to what goes next to what. And if a location or a record store or a restaurant decided, hey, we don't care, we don't want every poster, we want only this, these are the 5 shows we want, and they put 6 of those in the window, you would notice it. So
or a brand guide or something, like some sort of like overarching creative manifest that dictates how you present these things.
Sure.
Right. So this kind of segues into how our conversation ended up on this. So the question became not, is it effective? Because I think it's effective for getting a little bit of attention, getting a little bit of awareness, but is it the best place for bands to put their resources? Because we're in digital marketing, we know that a band could spend $100 and reach a few thousand people on Facebook or Instagram.
Sure.
How does the poster compete to that? Because I know you're going to print hundreds of those up and you're going to spend, $50, $60, $100 promoting your band with the posters. Would that be better spent somewhere else?
Well, I actually want to take it a step back, because I think one of the things that Virgil just hit on was it's in context, right? So if I am in a place that has all sorts of different bands, right? So if you're not from Denver, Cervantes is kind of the hippie joint, and then we've got Larimer Lounge, which is like more of the indie kind of place. But so if I am in a punk rock bar and there's a bunch of punk rock posters, and you're a up and coming punk rock band, get your poster in there, right?
You're already a paying customer at that point.
But if you're a hippie band, don't bring your poster here, right? It's gonna be completely misaligned. You're gonna disappoint people. But if I'm a punk rock band, posters in a punk rock bar amongst other bands that you're familiar with, it's gonna lend itself to a little bit more credibility just from the poster existing there, right? So if you're channeling this in the right place, then it's gonna be more effective, right?
Well, I think, I definitely think that's the case. But in the case of like the street teamers just putting 1 million posters up, I would say that any one poster is not getting that much attention. Right. But if somebody were to take the time and say, all right, this location, a lot of punk kids come here, we're going to only put the punk shows in this window.
Right.
That would be way more effective, but that takes a lot more time. And a lot of times they're just like cranking through as fast as they can.
And also, if I can interject and just piggyback on that for a second and say that, sorry, Tyler.
Let's move on.
But also, a lot of these posters are, frankly, crap. They're not very good. It's like you have the fancy photo of the band, the name in some goofy typeface over the top, and that's it. Like I think the 11 by 17 as a creative art form, you can still do something there, but again, like, I think a lot of people have this conversation. It's like, I don't want to invest all this design work and hours in an 11 by 17 poster when I could maybe intelligently port that over to a website or something for, and that's the question. I mean, when I see a lot of these 11 by 17 posters, frankly, 70% of them, I would say, are just not well designed. They're just not interesting.
Sure.
But again, if they all were, you'd have the same end result. It'd still just be white noise.
So, I mean, I think that's a perfect segue into the question that Dannon just asked, which is, where's the digital component here? I mean, we do live in, what 2019, if I'm not mistaken?
Currently.
Yeah, at the moment. So you have so many options available to you that actually go far beyond that one-dimensional poster interaction, right? Is it being leveraged? How should it be leveraged? Is anybody actually going to use something like a QR code?
When you're talking about like a local band, like a local Denver band that has a semi-small following, they might only be doing the poster and a handbill. But when you talk about like Live Nation or AEG, when those bands send in the artwork, they have an ad mat that goes, it's a whole folder. So there's a poster size, there's the print size for Westward,
social, Instagram,
social,
Square,
everything.
Your 628 by 1200 or whatever.
So they're thinking about
Facebook,
all the different sizes, and so they are thinking about digital as well. But when you're talking about the band that's just like they're playing Lemmer Lounge for the first time and they're actually making them maybe their first poster, they're not probably thinking about all those different sizes.
So let's talk about that small band then, because that's where I was.
Yeah.
I'd spend $50 on printing, and I don't know if I got any traction out of it because it's hard to track it. So is that small band, would it actually be better for them to spend that $50 on some targeted advertising than it would be to print out a poster?
I'd say, honestly, like, I think if you're going to print a poster, there is sort of a niche thing, especially in the music industry. Like, again, 11 by 17s are mostly used by musicians and comics, and there is something to be said about having a printed poster just because of nostalgia. But printing is getting cheap enough that you can do that, but also take your money and put it into a social campaign. You can touch more people through social channels than you can someone who just happens to walk past your poster on a light pole or in the front of a burrito restaurant. You will get more traction. I appreciate the 11 by 17 poster is in some ways the cassette. Like, it's nostalgic. We all like it. It has its comeback every now and then. Then it's maybe not so popular, and then it comes back. But really, you're going to want digital stuff to really reach as many people as you can.
Except for the fact, okay, let's just say that you're doing it on Facebook, right? Facebook applies a relevancy score to ads. How relevant is this ad to the audience based on how well they're responding? If I'm an unknown band and I'm putting money behind this, now, first of all, if I only have $50 to throw behind this, I'm probably not going to have a very effective campaign. I'm going to reach more people theoretically, but it's not probably going to be very effective. Also, your relevancy score is probably going to be very low, even if it's a video and it includes music, because one of the hardest things to get people to do is press play or actually unmute the audio so that they can actually hear something. So if you're unknown and people don't have a reason to listen to this, your ad costs are going to go up, your delivery rate's going to go down, and that $50 became way less effective.
So what's the solution to that then?
I don't know. You shouldn't be in a band. That's, I think...
Art is for losers.
No, honestly, so what I keep telling bands who I've had these conversations with is, one, be in a place where somebody has already pressed play. So I like YouTube. YouTube might be a good place for something like that, where audio is an essential component to it, more so than something like Facebook, I think. I also think, too, and this is going to sound cheap, and I recognize that, but do a cover of a song that people who would like your music will also like. Because then you can get up on Spotify. When somebody types in the name, it's going to show up there. Same thing with YouTube. When they type in the name of the song, you're going to show up amongst those results, and it's going to make somebody, think about that. But that's a longer term play. For the short term play, I don't know what you do.
Well, on that same topic, if let's say you're a pop punk band and the biggest pop punk band is playing at the Ogden Theater, you and your bandmates should have flyers and maybe a link to audio, and you're handing it out to everybody coming out of that show afterwards.
I would even go further than that. I mean, is it a bad idea? I mean, is our download stupid? Offering somebody a free listen?
I think maybe sending them to There's
Maybe
actually
Spotify.
There's a link that'll take you do a QR code or take the link, and it'll take you to all the options where it's Apple Music, Spotify, etc. But nobody's really downloading music is almost like trying to buy music. Nobody's doing that.
It's true.
Yeah.
So what do you think about taking that into the digital realm and doing a very targeted like geofencing campaign around a show with similar music that you play? That would help increase your relevancy score, especially on Facebook and Insta.
So one of the things that I really liked when I was doing DJ stuff that wasn't soul, I would put recommended if you like, RIYL, and then put in some of the bands that would prompt people who should like this kind of music, to the event. I think you could maybe do that. So let's go with that pop punk example. I don't know pop punk. Who's outside of Green Day, Blink-182? Give me an example.
I don't think anybody listens to pop punk right now, so I don't know that there's a big pop punk band.
You're at a Descendants show.
Yeah, Descendants is a great example,
right.
Actually. So you're at a
Legacy
Descendants
show.
Let's say it's at the Fillmore, which is a 3,000 cap room, and you're a baby band.
Right, and so boom, people are going to be Instagramming that. They're going to be putting it up on Facebook. So yeah, you geo-target that location, and the first thing you put in there is recommended if you like Descendants, and then start putting other similarly related bands. But now you're going to be far more relevant because you're hitting people during a Descendants show with that communication.
And we totally recommend doing a geo-targeting with our exclusion parameters around it, so you can get very specific to the venue.
Right, and so can that be explained without a computer in front of us?
Probably not. We'll have to explain it later.
So when you on Facebook, I'll try and do it. I'll confuse people. So on Facebook, you can drop a pin somewhere. So again, let's say that we're at the Fillmore, right? We can drop a pin on the Fillmore on Colfax here in Denver, and then we can reduce our radius to be at maximum at minimum a 1 mile radius from the Fillmore where we drop the pin. Now what we can do is we can create exclusionary 1 mile radiuses around it. So you exclude, the south and north, the east and the west by, a half a block. And at the end, you're just stuck with only the Fillmore. And then you say, okay, well, I want to do it on Thursday between the hours of 7 and midnight. And when
it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And I would say to people, like, if you want to, again, back to that nostalgia of the printed ephemera. I get that. It's the cassette. It's maybe the old crackly vinyl of doing it, the DIY way. But think beyond the 11 by 17. Think beyond. You don't need to be trapped in this arbitrary page size that's available at your printer. Like, I've found an effective way is doing, like, most printers now can run 12 by 18, which if you run a little bigger and then cut a little off the sides, you get a very interesting, weird little tall rectangular size that in a big wall of stuff kind of pops out a little bit more. Or
you're saying to keep the 12 by 18.
It doesn't have to be the proportion. You can cut to bleed in on the sides and make it tall and narrow, which I've done a couple times. Or think about stickers, or think about, like, just get beyond. Don't feel trapped by that constraint of that 11 by 17, because whenever you get into a marketing situation where you think you only have certain options, there's always another option. There's always a better way to do something. And the 11 by 17 is just some arbitrary thing that's just the paper size they have at the Office Max. Do something else. It doesn't cost that much more money these days to run some cool stickers or something. If you like that printed ephemera, do it, but just be a little more creative about it.
Well, I think you bring up a good point where it's not necessarily that an 11 by 17 isn't effective, but it's a philosophy towards marketing. If you do what everyone else is doing,
it can be a constraint. It can very easily be a constraint.
If you can think of a way to get out of that box, but still kind of play in that box,
use it, but you're using it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, with that example, you could make two triangles of that, make two different flyers. You could cut it into a circle, and put it next to the square. That's
you and your band can have a craft night, just cutting stuff out.
Yeah, totally.
So one of the things that we've done at Mile High Soul Club is, which is the night I DJ. I don't think I've ever mentioned that on the show before, but a DJ and I call Mile High Soul Club. It gets very hot in there. You get 300 people, and in the winter when nobody wants to turn on the AC or it doesn't make sense to turn on the AC, it gets very hot. So Steve, who DJs with me, he went out and guest DJ'd at a night in LA called Chills and Fever. And what they had was they were using their flyers to make fans, hand fans. And so at the, you have a popsicle stick at the end of it. You got the,
and what does that cost you? It costs you just thinking it up and doing it. It's not that much of a financial outlay.
Exactly.
Right?
And the people who are there are now going to go advocate because they're going to take a picture of something like that, or they're going to take it back to their house because it's unique, it's interesting. You don't see it everywhere.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
All right. So we live in a world without printers.
Well, is that the most effective? Is printing the most effective way to do this in 2019, or is it really just a legacy byproduct that we are completely afraid to let go of, even though we don't have a really good way of measuring its effectiveness?
I think it's a kind of like a sine wave, like in any sort of printed ephemera. There is something tactile about it. That's sort of like that sort of haptic thing you get from print that's a real thing. They're real. Virgil brought up screen printed posters. I make a lot of screen printed posters. I don't print them myself because I'm a terrible screen printer, but I know how to design them and work with good screen printers. And those things still do sell pretty well, and people still do commission those.
But for bands who are well known.
See, that's the thing, is it becomes an artifact. It becomes an artifact of an experience, and it's less, if you're a band starting out, that's not your first step. That's where you go after you're established, you want something collectible. And I think you asked the utility of print. I think that's where print shouldn't necessarily be your first stop on the road to making yourself known. It can be a stop. Yeah, exactly. It is a tactic, and it can be a very successful tactic, but handbills and 11 by 17, so the whole point of this conversation, those are not, don't just do that. I mean, there's something there, sure. Is it effective? Again, to the biggest point of this conversation, is that effective? Yeah, kinda. But not, that's as far as you're going to get it. At least for me, it's like, yeah, kind of. And ...
Right, because it's not going to, it can't exist, like I said, it's a tactic. It can't exist alone. That can't be your strategy as well. So,
well, I don't know. I was just thinking about, I've seen bands like at Warped Tour when we're talking about it being really hot, giving people bottled water that has a label that has a flyer for their show on the label.
That's a smart way of doing it.
I could do that at Mile High Soul Club too.
I wonder, single-use plastic, no.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, really, like again, what's the effectiveness? If I'm at Warped Tour, somebody hands me a bottle and it's got the flyer on it.
Yeah.
How many of those just end up on the ground?
I mean, how many of those do you have to print to make that impact there?
Sure.
I mean, I think again, that's the thing.
Idea.
It's like,
I like the idea. I don't know how you'd measure it because that's going to be a big expense at the end of the day. I mean, in a best situation, what is it? 50 cents per bottle once you put the flyer on it.
Oh my gosh, probably
somewhere in there. Yeah.
But
people do that. People do that crazy stuff, and it seems like it's almost more of like a when you get to that point, you're kind of winking at your audience a little bit. It's like, yeah, we know this is crazy. We know you don't need a Frisbee, but we printed up 28,000 of these things. So it's like, again, if you're getting started to market yourself, Frisbees is not shouldn't be your first option, but nor should just making.
We've got 4 Frisbees here. Let's pack that. So how much do you think people are actually spending? You're a startup band. I mean, like you said, Dan, and $50, that was kind of like a baseline, right? Is it still there? Is it $100 per show? I can't imagine it. I mean, bands are getting paid probably $100.
$50 is about what it would cost to print up, these 11 by 17 posters are getting down pretty cheap now. I mean, I think if you go to like Staples or something, you're getting ripped off at probably 20 cents a piece.
Okay.
And that's actually kind of overpriced. But yeah, you add that up, that's money, and you have a bunch of these things in your back of your car and in your house, and they're crumpled on the dance floor at the end of the night.
Well, and if you don't have a street team putting up these posters for you, it's all the time you take to go find places, ask permission, put them up.
It's a lot of work, yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of the fun of it, though, right? Like at that stage, if you're just starting out,
a young band,
you get to go into record stores. You get to be like, "This is my band."
Yeah, it's part of the it's part of the initiation process into being a band, but I still think you can be much smarter about it, do less of that, and have better impact.
So I'll just do a round, go around here. $50. What do you do?
Instagram.
Okay. Instagram advertisement.
Geo-targeting. Yep.
You do video?
Yeah. Video engages people so much better than just a still post does. Okay. A still post does way better than just text.
Yeah. And if you're good enough with iMovie, I'd say, really try and prompt people to turn on unmute. Right.
Right.
Because that's the hardest part. Press that button. Right. All right.
$50. Honestly, I'm bad about these things, and I always want to say something like, I'd go on Alibaba and get some pencils made.
Okay.
Like something just bizarre that just like, it's $50. I'm going to get
It's going to cost $50 in shipping.
I'm going to get with that. See, that's the problem. I'll get a pencil made.
Michael's never been good with money.
Pencil made. Honestly, right now I think Instagram's a good choice, and online engagement. Blogs would be especially for band, because I have my own musical projects, and a lot of it is just connecting with people through blogs and through like SoundCloud.
Wait, is it working? Because I've run music blogs before. You get bombarded with people.
It's working if you target it correctly. If you kind of like intelligently, like don't pitch to anyone who doesn't want to hear your baloney.
So at the end of the day, it's almost the same thing, because the people running those blogs are also fans of genres. So you
have to intelligently.
With them.
It's just like you have to find your audience like any place else, and understand that you put your effort where you know it's going to stick, and don't put it where it's not going to make a difference. And that's the intelligent move.
But for a show, well, I mean, again, as we're saying, almost the show is almost a tactical measure, though.
Well, absolutely it is. I mean, I assume if you're
a
band, it's not just the show. You're trying to. It's the next shows. It's your next album. You're thinking forward, like with this creative endeavor. The show is one part of it, but the show is definitely the tangible.
Especially right out of the gate, you're just introducing yourself to people. You still have a reputation to build.
I'd say a lot of bands now are actually starting with recorded product before a show, depending on the type of music. But a lot of with everything, with GarageBand and laptops and everyone.
Well, typically, they need that to even get the show.
Yeah,
booked.
you have to start with like a pretty slick demo that sounds okay, and you can then use that to both get the show and also target people. You can make a little video on Instagram. How hard is it to make a video these days on a computer? It's not super difficult.
Super easy.
Yeah.
I still charge a lot for it, though.
Yeah, as you should.
But they say, the best camera is the one in your hand, right? Just do it. Just get something done. Dannon, I'm so sorry that I said that.
No. It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. The best camera is the one in your hand.
Right,
I will never deny that. I just happen to put really good cameras in my hand.
Right. But if what you have is a smartphone, use it.
It's like pizza. There is no bad pizza. It's like there really is no bad camera. If you're pointing at the right thing, they say,
just cheese. Straight up cheese pizza is bad pizza. It's
I don't know. It's still pizza. Well, as long as you got sauce involved. If you're some
inside
weirdo,
joke is that's pizza's. That's Tyler's preferred pizza.
It's just cheese with no sauce, just bread with a piece of cheese.
That's a goddamn lie.
It's a breadstick.
That's a lie. That's a lie. I just don't want any meat on it because it's all pig meat and stuff, and I'm like, I don't eat pork. It's another episode. We'll do a whole episode about it.
Pizza.
It's not even a
is it effective?
All right.
Pizza's definitely effective. Although hold on here. Since we're already on this, sorry, Virgil. I know you're dying to talk. Okay, so downtown Las Vegas, on that little Fremont strip, there's a pizza place down there, and it's not the Rock Pizza. That one's actually pretty darn good. But there's a different pizza place that you're like, oh, I'm hungry as hell. I'll just go get this, and it says no refunds. And I think that whenever
that's
you
a good
see this is how I learned that any place that shows no refunds right by the register, like you got to turn around and walk because I definitely would have been asking for a refund.
Oh man, that sounds like a challenge.
Pizza. It's on Fremont Street in Las Vegas. Evil Pie, by the way, just go down a little bit, get something at Evil Pie. Go get something over at Rock Pizza. That's great, but that one that's on Fremont,
Sorry to bring it on pizza. Apparently it's dinner time. What is it?
Well, I'm just very sensitive about it and I have lots of. Okay, so Virgil, $50. What do you do?
Well, before that, on that same topic, there's a place called Taco House, and they sell you tacos if you take them home for cheaper than if you eat them inside. And to me, that's a no-no.
Oh boy.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Something bad's gonna happen after you have this. We don't want to clean up after you. You're taking those home and dealing with them in your own bathroom.
buddy. Man, I absolutely want to go and look at the user ratings on Taco House.
Yeah, they're on Wadsworth and Federal. I stay away, but that scares me. Okay, so I feel like if we're talking about spending $50, I feel like the best use of that is an Instagram or Facebook, some variety campaign. But I feel like if you and your bandmates are go-getters, you reach out to the bands that are on the bill and you say, hey, we have this video. Could you share that? And say, hey, we're playing with this band. If you have friends that have a lot of followers, you say, hey, would you mind sharing this? We have the show coming up. There's ways to do free digital marketing that can be really effective, because if you have a friend who is a tastemaker and they actually like your band and they share it to all their people, they're going to be like, wow, this band is cool. I'm going to go to the show. If you share it with the band that's on the bill, at least when those fans go to see it, they've already heard a song by you, and that's going to be way more of an impression that you're going to make on their fans. I think there's a lot of things you can do that cost very little money that you can do if everybody in the band contributes and works hard to get the word out about it.
Yes, and I totally agree, and that's a great use of third-party validation, which we've talked before about, and it's super powerful, and that's also what you're very great at.
Yeah, somebody else advocating for you is really, really potent. If I had $50, I'd probably, honestly, I'd probably spend $100. I know it's a cop-out.
I thought you were going to say buy pizza.
I'd buy pizza.
Buy some
But maybe
tacos.
that's
Print a
for
shitload of
takeout.
11 by 17s in podcast.
Actually, still, I like the idea of a poster, but I don't know that it needs necessarily to be a tangible thing, at least not that's everywhere. I mean, when we do Soul Club, we do about 20 posters, and then we put all of our money into digital marketing.
Make a
So,
few.
and here's the thing: keep your identity the same from poster to digital, right? So use the exact same images. Let people get familiar with that, with what it looks like. Absolutely leverage, recommend it if you like. If you're starting out brand new, don't do that thing where like, oh, we're kind of all these other influences and I don't really want to talk. No, talk about who you sound like. It's going to help you. And you sound like somebody. It's not a cop-out. Yeah, I think, but I really do. I mean, I appreciate good graphic design. I actually really appreciate the tangible poster for bands that I'm already familiar with. But if you're just starting out, you got to build that familiarity. Be where people who care about the kind of music are.
Yeah, it's a vocabulary. You got to establish it before you can start making sentences. You got to start building up those little pieces that tell people who you are.
Absolutely. And so the other thing is that Seth Godin, in his book, and I may have mentioned this before, in his book, This is Marketing, one of the notes that he keeps hitting near the end of the book is people like us do things like this. So whoever you are, the things that you're into, that probably translates very well to your audience, right? They do the same things. They're into the same things. So you don't just have to approach it you could almost approach it like a lifestyle brand, like it's not just that we sound this way, it's that we are you, right? We are this community. We are representative of it. And if you dig this stuff, you're going to dig this. You're going to dig the art we're producing. So I don't think I answered the question.
It's an answer.
Okay. All right. Any last thoughts about this topic before we sign off here?
My rates for 11 by 17 posters are very reasonable.
No, let's get. So, how much money do you make a year?
It's above
Buy
$300,000.
pizza once in a while.
No, it's not. It's at least two figures.
At least
Tens of dollars.
I'm a thousandaire. I don't want to brag, but I'm a thousandaire.
I know. So, yeah. Bling bling.
Oh yeah, I can buy anything at the secondhand store. Almost anything.
Me and Target, we have an arrangement. I can afford most.
I look for the red stickers. Okay, no, seriously. Any other last thoughts on what bands should be doing? Where do you see people choking? Like, I don't want to belabor the point here. But
Real quickly, I would say that, and I run afoul of this in my own musical endeavors. I also have a fledgling record label in Denver called Multidim. I'm going to give them a shout out because Tommy's been working really hard and he's my partner on that.
I'm sorry, did you say the URL?
It's multidim.net.
Oh, okay.
Compilation coming out soon, but it's
.net?
.net. Yeah.
Do you just suck?
No, I don't know why he chose that. He's a coder. He's like a data person.
Throwback to the early days of Linux.
Yeah, something like that. It's better than like .pizza or something. But don't let
sure it's better than
don't
not-
let
not better?
your things languish. Whatever you do, if you want to make 11 by 17s, do them, but don't just stop there. If you want to do something in digital, release your music on SoundCloud, do it, but don't stop there. You have to keep working. Any creative thing you put in the world, you have to keep pushing it from whatever angle, whatever leverage and fulcrum you can find to push it. You got to do so smartly. It's so easy now to create a piece of art, put it in the world, and just sit back and just hope it takes on. And that's just not the smartest way to do anything. So, but I find myself trying to do
hope
that
is
every
the
now and
problem
then.
in that sense.
Yeah.
You can't hope that it takes on.
No, you
Find a
really
way
can't.
to make it purchase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I would say. I'm done.
I mean, if you're in a band that's trying to make things happen, it's all about networking and trying to open for bigger bands. It's about trying to, maybe not even bigger bands, but bands in other, that play different venues that can bring a good following, and try to build your own following in whatever community you're in, and swap shows and connect with other bands and connect with other businesses, and just figure out ways to get people to talk about your band and think about your band that's not just the show.
I think those are all great points. Well, thank you guys for being on.
Thank you.
Find us on omniphonic.com. That's spelled the German way.
German way.
With an F.
Phonic is spelled Phonic in German, just so you guys know. It's not like the .net problem. That's a problem.
Yeah, I'm going to be taking that one to my grave.
I think there's probably a .dim. Just saying. Like,
is there? That's a good question.
multi.dim.
I am
my child .dim. My offspring .dim. Not mine, by the way. That's the royal. Yeah, so find us there, and if you want to connect with any of these guys, want to have questions for us, please reach out and give us a rating, and hopefully a good one.
And make comments on what you think about posters and just this whole topic altogether.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you, Virgil.
Yes.
We need you on every podcast. Guys, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.